typoed was that there's gradual things that change, so they make sure everything's equally blurry no matter where I look. You know, they ever make those things work? No.
Okay, let's go ahead and call the September 5th meeting of the Historic Preservation Commission to order. Can we have the roll, please?
Chairman Lane.
Here.
Commissioner Sibley.
Here.
Commissioner Fenster.
Here.
Commissioner Tarrant.
Here.
Commissioner Norton.
Here.
Commissioner Jacoby.
Here.
Commissioner Barnard.
Here.
Councilmember Mayor Pat.
Here.
Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you. First item on the agenda is approval of the August 1st minutes. I understand we may have a correction. Commissioner Barnard.
Yes, on the page 5, lines 31 through 34, I sent in a recommendation to Maria. She accepted those, but it wasn't time to put them in these copies. And it was during the comments of the commissioners. And on page 5 of the minutes, and it's lines 28 through 34. And what I changed, what I suggested being changed is that the conference the camp I was referring to is in Steamboat Springs, not in La Junta.
Oh,
And that was the only change,
Our
basically.
microphone's on.
Oh,
yep. Yeah. Now you're not, but now you are.
okay.
There you go.
Can everybody hear me? Okay. So it's on page 3 of the actual minutes of the meetings, lines 28 through 34. It's written about what I said about going to the on-the-road conferences, and the point I had made that we heard a presentation. Well, we heard that presentation during the Boulder conference, and it was about the camp in Steamboat Springs. So I just clarified that, and
Okay.
as opposed to what it says. So I'd move the clarifications.
Okay. Any other comments from any other commissioners? If not, I'd entertain a motion.
Chairman, I think you need
Jacoby?
a motion.
I move to approve the minutes with changes as discussed.
Thank you. Moved by Commissioner Jacoby. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Seconded by Commissioner Norton. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? None. The minutes are approved as amended. Okay. Next, report from the chair. I have 2 items. The first is just there was an article published in the in the Boulder Weekly about the Tower of Compassion, and so I did forward that to the commissioners, and appreciate everyone's effort on that. I thought it was a pretty well done article. I have not heard anything more from the Tinker Mill. They were talking about doing something on that as well. And then I guess just as a point of note, if it interests those of you on the commission, I was asked by the state of Colorado's State Review Board to serve on that, basically starting in January. So that would be the board that does review state and federal nominations to the register. So I intend to accept that. I think that'll be pretty interesting, and be happy to keep you all updated as to what happens. So if there's anybody in this room that referred me, I suppose I should thank you.
I don't know why you're looking out.
And that's all I have. Communications from our HBC liaison.
Good evening, Chairman Lane and members of the board. I have a few updates. Hopefully let me get a little closer to me so folks can hear. So just in terms of some staff updates, we have not reviewed any administrative certificates of appropriateness since the August meeting. We've had kind of a run on re-roofs in the last year or so, given all the hailstorms we've had. So we have not had any administrative certificates of appropriateness. I did have an application for tax credits, a potential tax credit from a residential side, hand delivered today. So that will probably be something coming to the board or coming to the commission. I literally received it this afternoon at about 4:00, so I can't really tell you anything about it. The Tower of Compassion, the public hearing for landmark designation, is going to be at the City Council meeting on Tuesday, September 10th. So it will be under the second reading public hearing items, and should hopefully be a nice, happy feel-good break for the council from all of the budget items. So that once we have that landmarking done, then we will be looking at the process for getting that moved forward for listing on the state and ultimately national register. So you may either have to recuse yourself or be a ringer, whichever one the bylaws state. So our meeting start. So in terms of meeting start times, we've been advised that chambers are again available for our normal 5 p.m. meeting start time. If we do decide to keep it at 6, we would need to amend the bylaws to reflect that. Kind of relating to that, we have some logistic challenges for our October meeting. That October 3rd date is smack in the middle of the Colorado Planning Association conference, which will be in Loveland this year. So we can make the meeting happen if we need to meet, if we have agenda items. But I would suggest that if we do have the October meeting, that we keep it at 6 just so I can get here from Loveland in time. So that is just a challenge I wanted to pose. I would also need to speak with Josh from AIRS to see if he would be able to do that as well. I believe he is in a leadership position with the Colorado chapter of the American Planning Association, so I don't know if he would be able to get away from the conference, but TBD on that one. So that's something, I don't know if you want to pause and discuss it or just kind of let me get through my items and discuss that once I'm done.
I'm making notes. Keep rolling.
Okay,
Yep.
cool. So relating to the article in the Boulder Weekly, just as an FYI heads up, if folks do get press inquiries, we have a new public information officer, Rogelio Mares, and he has requested that any press inquiries be directed to him before responding to them. They're just trying to keep a tighter, not leash, but make sure everything is vetted well and everyone's fully aware. So nonetheless, I think it was a great article in the Boulder Weekly. It was really focused on the Kanemoto family, so there was nothing in there that would run afoul of public information. He just wanted as a FYI, hey, run it through me first. Let's see. Finally, we do have, and this is something that will probably be coming to the commission in some form or fashion, and may very well to be. I'm still working with the project planner to determine coordination with the applicant, etc. We do have an application under consideration for the Beaupre Farms site, annexation of. I know some of the property has been annexed, but some of it has not. So it's kind of a combination annexation, amendment to the existing annexation concept plan amendment. There's a few different applications rolled into it, but the county did comment on the fact that there are historic farm buildings on that property that would be eligible for county landmarking status. So if they're annexed into the city, so we that's something we probably want to coordinate with the county. So I am in communication with Kristen Cody, who is the project manager for that project from our side. And we'll be having discussions with the applicant on that as well. See what we can do with relation to those farm buildings. I do know that there were modifications to that sewer line project that were done to enable those buildings to at least somewhat be preserved. So that's a discussion we need to have as well. So stay tuned on that. They did just do the first round of review. We just got the comments from the county last week. So actually, let me take that back. I think we just did a pre-application on that. So regardless, early stages of the application process, I'm in communication with our development review section, and everyone's pretty well briefed on if something that could impact historic properties comes up, to loop me in early and often. Related to that, just from a procedural standpoint, I'll just give you the update that our building permit folks have been extremely good about looping me in and contacting me if there's any even question of whether a property might need historic review. So those checks have definitely been put in place, and so even if it's interior projects, they're asking me if I need to look at it. So yeah, we have definitely put in some guardrails, and ensuring that we have frequent communication.
Great. Thank you. Any questions for staff from commissioners? No? Just to address the start time and October meeting, I would say I'm a little hesitant to call off or try to postpone the October meeting based on the last time we tried to move a meeting around for a number of reasons. So I don't have any problem with keeping the October meeting at 6 o'clock. Does anyone else on the commission have an issue with that? No? Do we need a formal motion for that, or is that can just?
I think to be safe, we would do a formal motion, and then also then take up the question of permanent meeting time.
Right after that.
Yeah.
Okay. So with regard to the October meeting, can I get a motion? Commissioner Jacoby?
I move that the next commission meeting be held at 6 p.m. also.
I'll second.
All right. Moved by Commissioner Jacoby and seconded by Commissioner Norton. All those in favor, say aye. Aye. Okay. Any opposed? None. All right. There we go. So our October meeting would be at 6. Separate item moving forward after that. Is there any feeling as to whether 6 or 5 is a preferred time from the commissioners? Yeah. I mean, I've always been in favor of the 5 o'clock meeting, but from staff's perspective, is that put any kind of burden on you, or?
I have no preference either way, just so long as it's not at 7. We have a few of those meetings at 7, so.
And it would just effectively default to 5 if we do nothing?
Correct.
Okay.
That's in the bylaws state that we meet on the first Thursday at 5 o'clock unless otherwise.
Okay, so if somebody feels passionate enough about it, you can make a motion. Otherwise, I'm going to move on. And you only make a motion to change it to 6. Okay, hearing nothing, those meetings will maintain their position at 5 o'clock, starting in November. Okay, next we have public invited to be heard for anything that is not on the agenda. We didn't have anybody sign up for that, so I'm assuming that everyone who is here is for the public hearing. So I'll go ahead and close the open public invited to be heard and move on to our public hearing on 844 Baker Street. So if we could get the staff report.
All right. Thank you, members of the commission. So we have a request for demolition at 844 Baker Street. This is basically the first application of the revised demolition code, demolition ordinance that was adopted earlier this year. I will note that typically the ordinance kicks in when there has been a formal application for a demolition permit. In the present case, the property owner had a pre-application meeting with Development Services, with Development Review Committee staff regarding a proposal to subdivide this property, so do a minor subdivision for the purpose of constructing 2 single-family homes. I recommended that before they get too far down the pipe with the subdivision, that they should really come and talk to the commission first about the demolition, since it would trigger the demolition ordinance. So at this point, we do not yet have a formal application for demolition, but we are doing the review as if we did. Essentially, like I said, trying to have some efficiencies, but also being proactive on the part of the applicant as well. So this particular property is at the southeast. I apparently don't know my directions anymore. Southeast corner of 9th and Baker in the historic East Side neighborhood. As I mentioned, this demolition is being requested to facilitate subdivision for the construction of 2 single-family homes. I will note there's a supplement to the original report that was both emailed to members of the commission as well as handed out in hard copy form, documentation from the applicant regarding some estatements and statements from an engineer, et cetera, appraisal information from the appraisal as far as conditions on the site, et cetera. So that information has been provided. It was received after the packet was posted and sent out. So as noted, this is being reviewed subject to section 2.56 of the Longmont Municipal Code. This property is, much like most of the historic East Side neighborhood, zoned residential single family, which does have a minimum lot size of 5,000 square feet. In the present case, this property is 11,500 square feet, so it's quite a large parcel, both relative to the zoning district, but also relative to just the general area as well. So it's a fairly small home. It was built in 1904. It is a 753 square foot vernacular hipped roof wood frame building. It hasn't really changed much from its original construction per the Cultural Resources Survey that was done in 2002. At some point, there was vinyl siding put on, but aside from that, there really haven't been very many exterior alterations. I'm going from 2 different computers, so we'll see if I can make this work. So at some point there was a garage and a hen house, and those were demolished at some point in the property's history. So like I said, as I mentioned, the property owner did have a pre-application meeting back in June with the Development Review Committee to discuss the proposed subdivision of the property, at which we recommended that he proceed with the demolition review ahead of doing the subdivision, just to ensure that he could do what he wanted to do. So, as I noted, the Cultural Resources Survey did note that there's generally a pretty high level of architectural integrity. That survey is a little bit dated at this point, but it's still based on a search of building permit records. It does not appear that there really have been any changes since then, aside from some minor interior jobs. The owner has indicated to staff that there are a lot of condition issues with the house that make preservation and reuse both costly but also impractical. Most notably, there are apparently foundation issues that are fairly significant. The other challenge is also the site. The house is located pretty smack in the middle of the site, so it really isn't. If it's not as feasible to keep this property and subdivide and have 2 legally conforming lots in the residential single-family zoning district, so there is that challenge as well. So there is photo documentation in the staff report that details the existing conditions of the property. showing both exterior and interior conditions on the property. So Commission Chair Lane and I did do an initial review of this proposal earlier this summer, and determined that it would be advisable to bring it to the full commission for review and consideration. So the question, based on section 25680, is whether or not there is reasonable cause to believe that this property may be eligible for designation as a landmark without the owner's consent. So as the ordinance is set up, if the property meets the criteria for designation so basically we do the review and take a look at, well, does this look like it's eligible for listing without the owner's consent? And that is a much higher bar. And so the question is, that's the question for the commission, is this something that would meet that requirement or meet that threshold, and which would then preclude demolition at this time, because that would then refer the project through that landmark designation process. So just going through briefly the criteria. So there are 5 criteria for designation without the owner's consent. Technically 6. The first one would be a petition requirement, but in the case of the case of proposed demolitions, that petition requirement is not in effect, basically. So would it meet one or more of the designation criteria in subsection A? Does the property have what is referred to as extraordinary historic significance? Does the condition prevent the owner from reasonably preserving the structure? Would designation create a hardship for the property owner? And does promotion of public interest as defined in the Historic Preservation Ordinance outweigh any resulting diminution of market value? So, going through this, in terms of the designation criteria in subsection A, of the 8 criteria, staff is of the opinion that 4 are probably met. So, okay, this is what happens when I try to do 2 mice at the same time. Bear with me here. So the 4 that staff is of the opinion would be met are whether the property has character, interest, or value as part of the development or of Longmont, basically the cultural, artistic, social, ethnic, economic heritage of the city. This is part of the original town plat, and it is an example of the frame vernacular building style that was popular in the early 20th century and is present throughout the historic East Side neighborhood. The site is not the location of a significant historic event, so that criteria is not applicable, nor is it identified with a person who significantly contributed to the development of the city, county, or state, or country. In terms of whether the property portrays a historic era characterized by a distinctive architectural style, as I noted, it is an example of that frame vernacular building style that was popular in the early 20th century and is present throughout this particular part of Longmont. It is not identified with a master builder or architect whose work was an influence in the development of the city or county. In terms of elements of architectural design details, craftsmanship representing a significant architectural innovation, not necessarily per se a specific innovation per se, aside from, again, being that frame vernacular, with the fish scale siding up on the upper levels of the structure. And then the other question is the geographic or regional importance, and this gets to the heart of our demolition ordinance, and that is that the property is located within the original town plat. And if the historic East Side National Register District boundaries included this portion of the neighborhood, it would be considered a contributing structure. The cultural resource survey that's included with the packet indicated that it's really the significance of this property is as a piece of the neighborhood. But it is, the challenge is that it's not technically part of a designated district, whether that's local, state, or national register. So then when we get down to the criteria for designation without the owner's consent, I do apologize. Again, well, actually, not yet. I was talking through the report more than anything. So the first one really is getting through the criteria with the owner's consent. So I really try not to have a ton of words on slides. So it's a personal style thing, but I do apologize for that. So when we get to the criteria for the landmarking without the owner's consent, the question is, again, one, does it meet at least one of the designation criteria that I just went through? Next, does the property have what's considered extraordinary historic significance? Staff is not of the opinion, based on the documentation that we have on file, it doesn't seem like it would necessarily rise to that level. What is considered extraordinary historic significance is definitely subjective and does not have a clear definition in the code, but it is generally accepted as, was there an important event there? Was there, did someone significant live there? Or something of that sort. From what we can tell, it doesn't have that status of there being one of the town founders or a significant visitor or some sort of event on the site per se. But again, this is staff's opinion. This is a determination for the commission to make ultimately. So the next question is, does the condition of the property prevent the owner from reasonably preserving the structure? Related to that, would the designation create a hardship for the owner? So supplemental documentation presented to the commission and to staff does indicate that the cost of needed repairs could approach the value and purchase price of the property. So that is a discussion for the commission and for the property owner to have, frankly. At this point, the structure really isn't habitable. There are significant electrical as well as plumbing conditions. And again, the foundation issues described definitely present some challenges. The information presented from the appraisal and as well as an engineer's assessment of the foundation indicate there are some significant problems there. We have the applicant has also indicated that it really isn't economically feasible to preserve the home, and there's also the practical difficulty of it's a 750 square foot home, which for modern living purposes does present some challenges as well. So I don't have a direct recommendation on whether or not it's extraordinarily, presents a hardship or is not economically feasible. I do believe that's a discussion for the staff, for the applicant and the commission to have, especially considering the late presented information as well. So finally, the final criteria is going to be whether the promotion of the public interests relating to historic preservation identified in the Longmont Municipal Code by designating the property a landmark would outweigh any resulting diminution of the market value of the proposed landmark. And this is really, I will apologize for being a little, both sides in my report, but this really is a bigger policy question. This is a question that the commission needs to have. It's driven a lot of discussion at council on various projects as well. In the last few years, there is the concern that historic neighborhoods are lost one building at a time, and losing one building, you ultimately do. It's like you get a tooth knocked out, and then all of a sudden you need dentures. The original town plat does represent the original square mile town of Longmont that was incorporated in 1873. And this property is part of this early history. It's also located at one of the entrances to the original town, which probably accounts for the larger size of this parcel, since it was kind of the edge of town going out into probably the more agricultural parts of the area. At the same time, the subject property is not part of a designated historic district, either at the local or national register level. It would be considered a contributing structure if it were part of such a district. The question is whether or not it rises to that higher threshold required for designation of a property without the owner's consent. Weighing this out, we also have the issue of the need for housing in Longmont. We don't have a lot of available land as a planner. This is also one of our big challenges here is we don't have available land. And increasing density within established neighborhoods is a strategy identified within Envision Longmont for increasing the city's housing supply. So while not a huge impact, this property could accommodate, two single family housing units and be in compliance with the land development code. Unfortunately, this existing house is, like, as I mentioned, it's situated in the center of the lot. Let me go back just so you can see a little bit here. So this is the parcel here. And the house is kind of smack, and to be fair, the county assessor footprints aren't always perfectly located where they are on the lot, but it's situated in a way that it would be very difficult to subdivide the property and build a second home and keep this house while still meeting all of our land development code standards. There are options for doing, variances and modifications and such. But that's something that would need to be, we would need to see just surveying in terms of, exactly how much space we're working with, if that were a consideration. So again, ultimately the question for the commission and potentially city council is whether our need for additional housing outweighs the public benefits of preserving the house at 844 Baker Street. And so that's really the question for the commission this evening. This particular public hearing was noticed as in accordance with the historic preservation ordinance. So the property was posted with signs, and there was published notice in the Times Call as well. So the options presented then before council would be to approve demolition of this property, don't approve it, and refer it to the process for designation as a landmark without the owner's consent, which ultimately would require approval by city council, or to defer action based on the need for additional information. So my initial recommendation was that we defer action based on the need for additional information. We have received a lot of this additional information, so the question is whether the information provided is sufficient to meet the commission's needs. With that, I have nothing else to add, and I'm here for questions, and the applicant and property owner, Scott Golden, is also here for questions.
Okay, great. Do any commissioners have questions for staff to start off with? Commissioner Jacoby.
With regards to deferral, I'm not sure with the new code how it's written. Does that mean it would be reconsidered, other options would be considered, and then brought back to us, or would that be the limits of our input? Would it be coming back to us after the deferral?
If it were deferred based on, Okay, again, let me try using one mouse at a time. It would be deferring to a later meeting for review of additional information. So,
Okay. If there are no other questions for staff, would the applicant like to offer any comments or? Yeah, if you'd come up to the mic and just state your name, address.
close your mouth.
Thank you. My wife and I acquired.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah,
Oh.
just for the record.
my name is Scott Golden, and I actually live in Johnstown at the moment, 23583 Conrad Street. My wife and I acquired this property from a relative who was put into a long care facility. And we purchased the property in order to provide him with sufficient funds to pay his medical bills and to have something to live on. So we, in essence, overpaid for it, $200,000, but knowing that the condition was not, in my opinion, livable. It's 1 bedroom, 1 bath. The plumbing issues are none of okay. The house has not been maintained for the past 20 years while he lived there. He was not able to care for the property. In addition, the foundation of the property is stacked stone, red rock stone, and it is collapsing all around it. My initial attempt to figure out what the cost of repair would be had been rebuffed by a couple of different foundation companies who just basically said, not worth it. So we won't even bid on it. Got an engineer to look at it and give me an idea of what it would take to actually repair the foundation. And then I also have some experience with electrical and plumbing issues as I am property management for my family, and noted that both are substandard and that there would be extensive work in order to make the house livable at this point. Therefore, it's not really rentable, and it's not saleable to anyone that I'm aware of who wouldn't want to go in and put in a lot of money to repair it, and then it would be beyond the value of the area. The appraisal actually states that it's not viable to do that. It's on page 12. My only option to get out of this was to subdivide and provide 2 houses for people in the city. And so that's what my goal is.
Okay, thank you. Are there any questions for the applicant? I have just one quick one. If there was a way to keep the home and get 2 lots, would that be something that you would entertain?
I would if it's economically viable, yes.
Okay, all right, thank you. Commissioner Jacoby, do you have a question for the applicant?
Yes,
I
I have a question for you if you
sorry.
want to come back. Thank you.
Sorry, I thought we were done.
So did I.
Yeah, I'll let you go.
Where to begin? So I saw in your application that you have 2 modular homes you want to put on this site.
Correct.
Do you know, so those are modular, pre-planned homes. How much does one of those homes run, roughly, in comparison to the repairs for this?
Each home would run, the price I got was $174,000 It's probably a little bit more now
Okay.
than it was, but that's about the price of one home.
Okay. And I read through this, and forgive me, I get a little woozy by the time I get to page 11 or of anything.
Understood.
The cost you thought would be about 194 and change, is that right, for
Correct.
correcting this thing? Did you look at potentially moving the house slightly on the lot? You talked about repairing the foundation. When I read this, my immediate thought was, how about building a full basement next door so you can increase the square footage, move the house over onto the new foundation, do the repairs, and that may be comparable in cost to building one of your new modular homes. And that would also preserve the architectural integrity and the character of the home rather than these modular homes which would not fit into the neighborhood and would, again, be an anathema to the historic nature of the neighborhood. Did you think about moving? I mean, Powell moving, I know, has moved something for me in the neighborhood, and they've moved other facilities. Have you looked into that?
I have not. I just recently thought about that as a possibility, but the biggest challenge I have is I am not sure that the structure of the building itself would survive such a move. I can. The
moving expert would have a better idea,
Yeah,
right?
my structural engineer, the engineer that I had come out, did not look at that as the possibility, but so
Okay.
yeah.
All right. Thank you.
Okay. Commissioner Norton.
Yes, and actually this is a question for staff. If we do a forced designation, it would be locally designated. Would the property owner then be eligible for residential tax credits for work done on this property?
That is actually a very good question. You typically, if a property is designated, then it is eligible for tax credits. I don't know that the mechanism for designation has any impact on that eligibility.
I don't think so either. Okay, I just want to put that out there for consideration as we are brainstorming different directions.
And that brings up another point that I would like to make before we move on, which is I am quite sure that I can get financing for the new project. I am not sure that I would be able to get the financing unless I had additional help from the city in order to move the house, because I would have to go to people who would loan me the money, and I'm not sure if that's available to me.
Okay. Commissioner Jacoby, do you have another comment?
Yeah,
Question?
again, I'm not sure if you explored, if you're familiar with the benefits of historic designation of your home. I was looking at the expenses you listed, and that included $8,000 for permits. Well, permits in the city can be waived, and materials taxes can be waived. Window replacement was $8,500. We've talked here before about other much cheaper alternatives if the windows are structurally sound, and who knows? That'd have to be looked at. There was, $1,000 for fencing and landscaping, which would be going on anyway if you put in other things. So really, the numbers might come down, and it might be economically feasible to move it, which would be so much nicer for the neighborhood. And being history dweebs, I'm sure we would all love to see that home preserved. It's vernacular style, but it is very characteristic for the time. It fits quite exquisitely into the neighborhood, and I, for one, would consider it for historic designation if you wanted to pursue that first, and that may save you significantly in some of your expenses, and that's something I think you should look into before we decide to scrape and restart.
The only comment I could make to that, Commissioner, is that I I would definitely have to look into it. I understand that from the appraisal that I was reading when I was preparing for tonight, the appraisal indicated that the siding on the house is actually rotting at this point, which would make it even more difficult to accomplish what you're asking for, but or what you're suggesting. But I'm not opposed to looking at that as a possibility.
Thank you. Any other questions for the applicant? No. Thank you very much for coming down. I'll now open up the public hearing, and the first person on our list is Sarah Levinson. If you would please come up and state your name and address before your comments, and you'll have 3 minutes to speak.
Good evening, commissioners and Mayor Peck. My name is Sarah Levison. I live in the historic Booth House, which is the second home that the quarterback of that 1908 championship high school football team lived in, built in 1907. We also had foundation issues, which, you know, the house is still standing and a couple of cracks in the wall, but we didn't have the foundation sitting on two corners of the house. And the engineers said it was so solidly built, and houses were in that day and age, that it was no problem with the structural part of the house, even though the foundation. So I think the foundation issue is a minor thing, even though it seems major. I would like to start my comments with reminding the commission about what's on the city's website. What's historic preservation? Its intention is to preserve, conserve, and protect buildings, objects, landscapes, or other artifacts of historical significance. Why is it important? Benefits to the community, including contributing to the Longmont sense of place, helps to convey the past to the future and tells Longmont's story. Benefits to the environment. Again, with demolition, it is more sustainable to recycle the built environment and therefore reduce what we put in the landfill, and it also conserves resources. Benefits for the economy. Preservation of historic properties can help to stimulate the local economy, creating jobs and enhancing tourism. Colorado Preservation Inc. has a study that includes the additional economic benefits. So I'll point out that the manufactured homes that would be placed on this would be manufactured somewhere else, and the economic benefit would be somewhere else in some other city. So I think that that's another consideration about demolition, the economic benefit. I also think that there's a false narrative that's been created that your choice is to demolish it and get two brand spanking new homes that, if you look at the proposal, have nothing to do with the character of the neighborhood. It is, as staff pointed out, the entrance to the neighborhood, and to have that as the entrance to the neighborhood would start diminishing the value and the historic properties adjacent. In the landmark book, Taming the Terror Down by James Lindbergh, that was published by the National Trust for Historic Places, this is the exact criteria and the beginning of a tear down trend. And so the small properties next door then become the next target. And I'm thinking, first of all, I would also like that the commission does not consider the supplemental information, because it was not available to the public at all, not even in a hard copy. I had to borrow staff's copy when we walked in. And there was no time for the public to participate in that conversation. The demolition of a home, the argument that it's inconvenient because of the location, it's too small. We're promoting small houses. 762 square feet is only less than 300 square feet than what the 1,000 square foot replacements are. So I ask you to not allow the demolition on the property. I also ask you not to consider the additional information that was submitted at a very late hour, and also to allow the members of the public to rebut other comments by the applicant at a later time.
Thank you. Next speaker, Scott and Marcia Golden. Oh, that's you. Oh, you're on the list. Oh, sorry. Yeah, I'm just blindly leading this. Sorry about that. Sharon O'Leary.
Sharon O'Leary, 534 Emery Street. Historic neighborhoods are lost one home at a time. Let me say that again. Historic neighborhoods are lost one home at a time. The city of Longmont thought that preservation was so important that in 1971 they formed the Historic Preservation Commission to preserve and conserve for the citizens of Longmont and future generations. You were selected from a pool of people who applied to sit on this commission. This is not a book club. This is not a social club, but a commission that is expected to be thoughtful in making hard decisions surrounding preservation. I hope you're up for the job. 844 Baker sits in Longmont's oldest neighborhood, the historic East Side neighborhood, which a section of it has national designation as well as local designation throughout the neighborhood. This home may have some problems given its age, and there's not a home in the neighborhood that does not have structural foundation problems. Is this going to be the bedrock for demolishing future homes? These problems can be remedied and possibly with the designation could receive assistance through the preservation program. Longmont cannot be in the business of saving only grand homes, but also our humble beginnings. Demolition should be the last option on the table. Preservation benefits the community. It benefits the environment, as what Sarah said earlier, and preservation benefits the economy. You need to make the decision that honors the role you were given and request a postponement to look at other options. Staff said that that home is unlivable, then why did not the city condemn it? Staff talked about the home being unlivable due to the size. Well, what are you comparing it to? A tiny house or a grand mansion? Has anyone thought about adding an ADU to this address? If you want to address housing problems, that's another option. But allowing demolition by neglect as your new yardstick, then you are not in the preservation business. I ask you, historic neighborhoods can also be saved one home at the time. I ask that you do your preservation job. You need more information. The public did not have access to all the information you have. You need to do the right thing and keep the public in the process. I do appreciate your time on being on this commission, but step up, please. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's see. Our next speaker was Dido Clark, but she was not available. Do you have that letter?
I do.
Okay.
If you'll give me one moment. I will read, if I can get this thing to full page view. All right, that is as clear as mud, but I will read this into the record.
Okay.
To whom it may concern, I was dismayed to see the sign for a proposed demolition permit for 844 Baker Street for a beautiful historic home just down the road from me. I can see no good reason for demolishing this property. It is a unique, irreplaceable house with a unique history. For well over a century, this house has been part of our historic neighborhood, which contains a National Historic District. While it may or may not be contributing in a strict sense, parenthetical, I can no longer tell because I can no longer find the surveys on the City of Longmont website. That's a completely different story as an aside. We are trying to work on that. This house certainly contributes to our lived experience as historic East Side neighbors. The new owner's application for demolition shows a complete lack of any sensibility or understanding of the neighborhood that we are so proud of, as well as total lack of creative thinking. I don't want to feel like I live in a time capsule, but nor do I want to see our neighborhood literally disappear one house at a time. So could these new owners, developers consider moving the existing building onto new foundations if it indeed actually needs new foundations? The cost of moving could be offset by purchasing a complete house ADU kit that includes full kitchens, bathrooms, lighting, floors, etc. These can be bought online for relatively little. There are dozens of companies to choose from for these already built homes, many of which would fit perfectly in size and style into our neighborhood. Thank you, Dr. Dido Clark, a co-chair of the Historic Eastside Neighborhood Association, 534 Baker Street, Longmont, Colorado, 80501.
Okay, thank you for reading that into the record. The last speaker I have is Brian Clark.
Well, I live at
Can we get that microphone?
I live at 825 Baker Street, across the street. I've been there for 43 years, and that's kind of part of the neighborhood, you know. I like the idea of keeping the house, moving it. That's really a good idea. I mean, keeping it, maybe add to it, put a basement under it. But the problem with putting two houses on that lot, there's been, right at that intersection, in front, across from Grandpa's Pond, there's been cars hit there at least 5 or 6 times that I know of, because there's parking there for Grandpa's Pond, and they all park on that side of the street, and you bring more cars, there's no place to park as it is on that street. And I don't want people drifting down the street parking, taking up all my parking spots. And my next door neighbor, he's got these logs in front of the property where you can't, if you park there, you can't open your car door on the passenger side. So I like the idea of moving it. I used to work for a house mover back in Minnesota in the 70s, and it's way doable. I mean, they can move, we've moved 3-story houses, so it's definitely a doable thing. I like that idea. Thank you.
Thank you. Seeing no one else in the audience, I'm going to go ahead and close the public hearing and open up the discussion from commissioners. Any commissioners wish to comment? Let's see, Commissioner Fenster.
Yeah, I don't think that the work that has been done to consider all the alternatives is as yet complete. So I would recommend that we defer action, and I think ask our staff to make recommendations on what further work can be done, either in terms of preservation or preservation and moving the house, or any other alternatives. I think passing finally on this subject would be premature at this time.
Okay, thank you. Any other commissioners? Commissioner Jacoby?
Forgive me for having a lot to say tonight. I think some interesting points were made tonight. One is that all the foundations on the east side, at least, all the houses have some problems. Many of them have structural problems. My time's not up. There is a house at 830 Emery that was demolished. It was an 18-something house. It was demolished, about two or 3 years ago, because they wanted it bigger and the foundation wasn't good enough. So that was the excuse for demolition. Another house was proposed. It was a relatively incongruous house for the neighborhood. The neighborhood complained. Already the zoning says a house has to be compatible, and the design was changed. Again, when we're considering the economics of this, I'm not sure that 2 modular homes are going to stand up to zoning to be compatible with our neighborhood. And I'm not sure, maybe Jennifer, you could comment, maybe it would work. But I can tell you that the neighbors would be in arms if those 2 modular homes, and there are pictures of them on page, I think, 26 and 27. If those went in, there would be quite a few complaints. They might be cheaper, but they're not a reasonable alternative, and other alternatives would be more expensive and change the equation. So I just thought I'd throw that out there.
Yes, I think there's some good points that have been made by Commissioner Fenster and Jacoby. My biggest concern is that I like to study the main argument that the proponent has made is the financial argument, and he might be right. But this morning, I put a call into staff because I said, how am I supposed to make these decisions without any data? And I found out this afternoon that it was about to be, just had been sent to us. So I think Jennifer did the best she could in getting it, but I couldn't possibly get through this stuff this afternoon. I mean, I was, as it turns out, I was doing other stuff this afternoon. Even if I wanted to, I couldn't have read it. And it's the basis for our decision. So just on that basis alone. Now, I think the other issues really have to be up to the owner. It's not, I don't think it's our job to go out and do development work and to decide, well, this foundation or that foundation. But I think just alone, my reason for voting for it is simply because I haven't had a chance to review the basis for the decision that we're asked to make.
Commissioner Norton? Commissioner Norton?
Thank you. So my understanding is we are not being asked to make a decision on whether demolishing this property is appropriate. It's whether we should designate against the owner's wishes. Is that correct?
It's
Well, I know they're related.
It's 2 sides of the
Yes.
same coin. So the question is, if the property should be rises to that occasion, rises to the threshold, then you would be asked. So basically,
Right.
If yes, then no demolition. If no, then the demolition could proceed potentially. So
So based on the question of designation, I think that I have additional questions around how this, excuse me, I promise it's allergies, how this property contributes, I tested, contributes to the East Side District. And I think, I know that it officially doesn't, but it does. I think that probably goes into our later conversation around the survey plan, and how we're going to be approaching some of these things. Based on that and based on the significance of the house, I think that we need to really seriously consider that it does meet extraordinary circumstances as part of this district, whether it's official or not. So I'd just kind of like to put that out there for our discussion as a Historic Preservation Commission. But I would also like to say that, I'm heartened by what I hear from the property owners, and that it sounds like they came to you guys for a pre-approval conversation, that there's the opportunity for more discussion. So, I agree with Commissioner Barnard that we didn't have a ton of time to review this today. And it probably is not appropriate since the public didn't either. That we've got other questions around the historic district and how this house contributes to the historic district. As we gather additional information, would it be appropriate for the current property owners to investigate some of these larger issues that we have brought up, or these other options, maybe with staff help, because I do understand that historic preservation, when it's new, can be a little overwhelming, but I think there's potential paths forward. So can we gather all this information in different ways and defer this for later?
I would say staff can definitely provide guidance based on what we're hearing from the commission. We do have constraints in terms of what we can do from a time and a appropriateness standpoint, but
Sure.
we can definitely, work with the applicant to put together essentially a plan to, things that we can look at. Moving forward, what I'm hearing is from this commission is that you would like more information on the feasibility of moving the property, of moving the structure over, as far as if the condition is of the actual building is such that it could be moved without being destroyed, what the financial cost of that would be, options for expanding the living space potentially,
Yes.
750 square feet. It is small by modern standards. It's not undoable at all. I think we've all lived. I lived in a 800 square foot 2-bedroom house at one point. So, it is doable, but I know just from a marketing standpoint, it presents challenges, but at the same time, there is the market there. So, sounds like there's some additional, investigation that you would like to see.
Yeah, I think we can get that wrapped up in a motion when we're all said
Okay.
and done, just so it's
Okay.
clear to you.
Okay.
And I've got a couple more
Perfect.
that want to speak, so we'll
Perfect.
just keep rolling along. Let's see, Council Rep, Mayor Peck.
Thank you. If the commissioners decide to defer this, I would hope that staff would look into the possibility if this was designated as a historic property, what would the tax credits be monetarily, and are they available? And also, would it help if this property were actually put into the historic district, as it is not now in the district? Would that help with the tax credits? And if it was historically designated, are there any dollars to help with any of the decisions that the owners make as far as moving the property, some of the benefits of being designated as a historical property?
Thank you. Commissioner Jacoby.
Yes, thank you again. I'd like to not disagree with Commissioner Barnard, but he made a point that the economics is important, and it is very important. I mean, it's always the economy's stupid, right? That's what Clinton said, and it's very important. But I think we need to also consider our role as commissioners. As Sharon O'Leary mentioned, our role is to promote preservation of homes. And so the economics is part of that. We have to consider that, but that's not all of that. And I think part of the economics also, there's so many intangibles with historic preservation, intangible benefits. But one economic benefit, I think if you look at the price of homes per square foot in the east side, these little homes, people want smaller homes. People want to be in that neighborhood, yes, but I think they appreciate the character of the neighborhood too, and you may get more rent for a renovated home than you would for a modular home, which frankly is not built to last. If you're going to put renters in there, those things tend to fall apart and need more maintenance too. So that's all part of the equation, the economic equation. But I think we have to consider our role as commissioners. How much is that? How much are we here to promote preservation as well as the practical side of the bottom line?
Thank you. Yeah.
How do I?
So you do that, and that puts you in the queue.
Okay.
And then sorry. Yeah. Okay. All right. Let's see. So Commissioner Tarek.
Okay. I just would like to echo and agree a couple of things that Commissioner Jacoby said. And I think we are looking at two things. We're looking at the more subjective idea of preservation and more objective idea of the financial aspects. And I think some of the speakers we had, I do agree with you. It's very important that, you know, we can't just demolish a structure because it's been neglected or because it's inconvenient or it's not large enough, because part of these ideas are, you know, is why we want to preserve these structures. And it is true, you know, you lose one house, you're losing part of that whole neighborhood and that district. And I think that is very important. And that is part of our roles here as commissioners, is to protect that. In regard to the financial and economic aspects, I do still have a lot of questions. And the idea of, you know, looking at the repair estimates, I would recommend that we defer any voting now, because I do have questions about how those repairs are going to be so much more expensive than putting two modular homes, building two more homes. I mean, I recently bought a home here in Longmont. It's a small home. It had major foundation problems, electrical, plumbing, blah, blah, blah. And we were able to save it. It was small. We put on an addition, and we were very careful that the addition matched the exterior. And, you know, people said, well, you're not going to find someone to do that for, you know, not a lot of money. And we did, you know, we just had to look around and find someone. And so I do have questions about how the cost plays out, the comparison between preserving and, you know, building two new homes. And so I would like more information on that. And then in regard to the idea of also public interest in that, you know, you're creating more housing. Well, you're replacing one small house with two small houses. So you're getting one extra house. I don't think that, if you're weighing this, you know, that is really an argument for saying that you're providing a lot more housing in Longmont. I think that's a questionable argument as well. So, thank you.
Okay, Commissioner Sibley.
All right. Thank you for saying that about the two houses, because that was kind of in my head as well. I wanted to thank everybody for coming, and I just wanted to say that I'm glad that you folks came today and that things are kind of starting, you know, coming to us first is great. And the reason I say that is, look at how many ideas kind of came out of this particular meeting, and hopefully, you know, with talking about tax credits and possibilities of moving and maybe adding to the house or something, I think looking at the neighbors and hearing what they're having to say, I think, okay, you know, maybe two houses isn't great because of parking. Never thought about that with Grandpa's Pond. You know, so there's maybe some other things to consider. So I just want to say thank you to you folks for coming, but also to these folks for coming and supporting their neighborhood. And I think we've really come up with some interesting ideas just to start with. So hopefully that gives you guys a launch point for all of this. So
All right, thank you. I've got just a couple of my own comments. I did actually have a minute to run through that packet that was sent to us, and it's going to end up in the public record. And based on my quick math, you know, if you do take a look at foundation costs, you're going to build a foundation regardless. You're going to build a foundation for a new home, two of them, if you did this. So if we peeled out just, you know, a new foundation out of that and a couple other little things, you know, landscaping you're probably going to pay anyways, you know, those repair estimates do get down to where I think you really ought to take a closer look at this, but I think you could find that those repair estimates could be less than the cost of another home. Maybe that would give you an opportunity to put an addition on the thing. Maybe it's a basement, but I do think there's a real opportunity here for everyone to win, right? Because I don't know that this isn't about, we want this. Preservation is important. It's absolutely true. We lose, these houses one at a time, but we do have a housing issue, and we gain houses one at a time. And so I would actually argue that there's a little more importance to, you've got a lot that could be legally split. You have a right to do that. If there's a way that we can make that work and add a house into the pool and get you what you are after, that you can win, but then the community can win because we preserve a home and we preserve the fabric, and we can help you make that happen for the same dollars, or maybe it's even less by the time we factor in some credits and so on. That's a win for everyone, and that's what I would like to encourage. So I think you're getting the message pretty strong here that we're, I think as a board on the whole, pretty supportive of trying to find a way to keep this house. I think it would be preferable not to engage in a process that forces anyone down a path. I'd rather see something where we all work collectively and get something done that everybody's happy with. With that in mind, it sure feels like we're going to ask for a motion to continue and ask for the applicant to do a real investigation into, can the house be moved? My rough guess with my own experience is that that's a yes. Very often these homes are built very well above ground, and somehow the foundations never got really paid a lot of attention to. And if that can be, you've got a cost in here already for the raise and lower. The move from there, my guess, is not going to be that much. If you can work out a scenario and really investigate the possibility of having that as your approach, and then work with staff to see what kind of other benefits economically there can be from the tax credit side, and come back if you think you need to here with a different proposal. If you want to move it, then we'd probably end up looking at that as well, just as give you the approval. But I can assure you there'd be a lot more support for something like that. So again, I do appreciate you coming down here and starting this process, as other commissioners have mentioned. With that, let's see. I'll entertain a motion unless you have something else, Commissioner Jacoby.
I would move that we defer decision on demolition.
Okay, if you wouldn't mind, I think we need a little more clarify. Can you run through that specific option, please, Jennifer? Thank you. All right, this didn't happen from me. Thank you. So it would be defer action on the request based on the need for additional information, which would be more detailed information about about moving the property. Okay. All right. Maria, were you able to get that, or do we need to? Okay. Okay. Thank you. Can I get a second?
I will second.
Okay, so all motions tonight are made by Commissioner Jacoby and seconded by Commissioner Norton, which makes the recording very easy. I'm through. Maria, thanks you for that.
Yeah.
So there is a motion on the table to defer with a request for additional information. All those in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? None. So that motion carries unanimously. All right. Thank you for your time. Okay. With that, we will move on to our new business item, which is a review of the draft historic survey plan.
Yes, so we have as you mentioned, a draft of the historic survey plan. The consultant was not able to be here this evening. We'll see if we can get him to the October meeting to discuss this a little further. So basically, we're looking at content versus formatting for this plan. They essentially identified areas of interest that we need to take a look at. generally those areas are those that are adjacent to the original town. The sense was that we've got pretty good documentation of the original town plat, with a few minor exceptions, but in terms of larger areas of focus, would be the Bond Farm neighborhood, what's known as Brown's Old Apple Farm, the Cannery East, Hilltop Village, Kitely, Longmont Estates, the Lou Miller subdivisions, Old North, original town site, again with some additional filling in, as well as the Southmore neighborhood. So strategies that have been recommended would be prioritizing the Bond Farm and Cannery East areas for surveys. They are experiencing probably the highest development pressures outside of the original town area for those adjacent, those kind of first ring suburb-ish first ring neighborhoods outside of the original town. And also look at the appropriateness of expanding current National Register historic districts. That feeds into the discussion that we just had regarding the historic East Side District and the fact that it does not go all the way up to 9th Street or to 9th Avenue. And also consider neighborhood guidelines and conservation overlay districts where appropriate. Those were really the big strategies. There are some, let's see what else we have. So those are really I really just wanted to give a high level overview and open it up to the commission for discussion. If there are any areas that you want to see more discussion of, if you have any specific edits or any red lines or comments that you would like for me to share with Josh and the AIRS team.
My first comment was, could we please have some maps?
Yes, that was what I thought.
There will be maps in there. There will be maps.
Okay. Other comments or questions? Say, Commissioner Barnett.
First, I wish he were here tonight, because I'd like to congratulate him on really hearing the things that we said at our meeting with him. I really enjoyed reading the attached information and looking forward to reading it as it's filled out. But I think his outline is good, and I think his approach is good. I think the way he lays out each one of the pieces. So it was very educational for me, learning some of that stuff, and especially reading it right next to Commissioner Jacoby's book. So I just encourage him to keep at it, and hopefully we'll see some more drafts soon.
Other comments or questions? No? Oh. I guess so I did really appreciate the sort of action matrix at the end and the prioritization. And I understand that this will be part of the entire process, but beyond that sort of matrix, what I'd really like to be able to see is, in order to act on these priorities, I mean, I think we need to discuss amongst the commission, do we agree that these priorities are appropriate? Since they're there, I wouldn't mind hearing from anybody if you have at least an exception to make. But to have an action plan for those, say, first 2 or 3 priorities, these are the next steps that need to be taken in order to, hit this particular action item. What do we need to do, right? What's an appropriate timeline, and what's an expected financial need for that, if any, if that's something that's a request for council to put in their budget, if it's something that needs a grant, so on and so forth. Okay, but yes, great start.
Okay.
Fun to see, great to see progress and things happening, but yes, maps. Please.
So aside from graphics, which I know are in progress, so I guess in terms of next steps and is, you know, obviously it's the graphics. In terms of the action matrix, order of priority based on commission input. If the commission has input on what you see as the high priority areas, that would be great for me to be able to provide. If that's something that you would like to email me after the fact in the next week or so, that's great as well. If you want, if you'd like to, you know, do a markup and send it to me, I can always provide that as well. What I could do is put a document we use a system called SharePoint where people can comment on the same document, and therefore it's kind of a master document. I could always set something like that up for the commission if that's something you're interested in. What I'm also seeing is you'd like to see essentially, well, yeah, we do have the as the items, commission priority, funding sources, estimated costs. These are things that we need to identify as well. So just figuring out which of these areas are your highest priority and you know, kind of where to start.
Right. And with the National Register District potential expansion, you know, if that, what's suggested, right? What you know, it's an idea, right? So what are the boundaries that would be suggested? And obviously with a explanation of why, right? So we can understand, well, okay, well, maybe that was a miss, or and I don't know how long. I mean, it's been long enough. Obviously, the downtown register district is relatively new, but you know, why were the boundaries of the east side and west side made exactly where they were? That might be a hard question to answer, but if we can answer it, that would be potentially useful, because it feels like a question that I might ask.
I've definitely had the question.
Yeah.
Especially as we're going through this exercise of looking at properties within the historic east side.
Right. Thank you. Commissioner Jacoby.
That was exactly my point. When I read through that, I saw they discussed maybe extending the west side historic district into the Browns Farm section. They didn't talk about the east side, but again, if you read my book, you'll see that there's a lot of history and a lot of significant homes throughout the whole square mile on that side. And extending on that side might stop people from initially thinking that they can put modular homes in our neighborhood and think, wait a minute, what do I have to do? It may be a very good, I mean, there's some carrots associated with it. I think the neighborhood might appreciate expansion of the historic district, and it might be feasible in that sense. It might be popular, but it might also preempt inappropriate thoughts about development in the neighborhood. So I think they should look at the east side as well as the west side.
Thank you. Any other commissioner comments on this? No? Oh, okay. Let's see, I'm going to give it, looks like Commissioner Barnard beat you.
I think the same point. I think when the downtown historic district was designated, that's what there was. You know, and then north of 5th Street, it was like, cemeteries or farms or whatever. So when I look at that and I look at downtown Main Street, I say, well, why do we stop at 5th Street? Why isn't, I don't have the answer to that. So whether it's to know whether we should try to go further than that, it would be helpful if my assertion is correct, that it was just, that's where the town was at the time. That's where the development was. So there wasn't nobody even thought, well, we're not going to designate some farm as a historic property. But is it time to relook at that? I think just like Commissioner Jacoby was talking about the east side, I think the downtown area definitely needs to be looked at. So what are the advantages of expanding it to Long's Peak or to 9th Avenue or whatever? Anyhow.
So I can say the downtown district is our most recent district. It's really in the past, 5 5 years, maybe. It's been the past 5 years. So it is our most recent one. So
Yeah.
I don't know what given how new it is, I don't know if it's appropriate to look at expanding the boundaries at this point, or maybe it is.
Well, I guess the question is, why was it? Why was it established if it was in the last 5 years? I mean, the downtown hasn't expanded that much in the last 5 years. So there was historic development further up. Why did we stop at Fifth Street? And if it's recent, then we might even be able to find the answer to that.
Well, I suspect also the answer is, and I would just need to contact Kimberly at LDDA, but I'm fairly confident the answer has to do with concentration of the historic buildings in the registered district. It gets a little more thin as you go farther north, but that's a discussion I could have. It's a question I could ask.
Commissioner Norton.
Yeah, I really appreciate it. You can tell that they really listened at the retreat and they took everything we said really seriously, and it's reflected in this, so that's really nice. Both in the matrix and then in each of the recommendations for the individual neighborhoods, it talks about neighborhood guidelines or design guidelines and standards, design review. What is it going to take to reach that? Because I think that that's really where we would start to see better guidance for folks who want to do things like subdivide a lot or pop a top and do something over on one of those neighborhoods. So what are those steps, and is it going to take full survey of each of these neighborhoods to get there? Is that something we haven't really discussed with these folks yet? I really want design guidelines.
That would definitely be part of a completely separate. That would be part of a different process. We don't have the budget budget for this one.
We don't right now.
It's definitely a much heavier lift, and we are, as Mayor Peck can tell you, in budget season. We're definitely making there's some hard decisions being made. As we're looking at projections, especially considering some of the property tax legislation, special session information coming out of the state. So definitely what we do want to see is not a timeline, but a map, what's it going to take to get there. But in terms of actually getting the work done, it's, we're not there. So that's really where we are, where we need to do that prioritization and understand, what it's going to take to develop these guidelines, and then in what order we should be developing them. We would also need to figure out the public involvement, public outreach, because that would be very significant as well as you're looking at, especially as you're looking at guidelines, if they take the form of conservation overlays. We do have some good language in our code in terms of residential compatibility standards. That's a discussion I need to have with our building folks to make sure that, how are we evaluating that, because typically planning staff doesn't look at single family infill projects unless there is an ADU involved. But that's a discussion we could have for sure.
Okay.
But I would see, realistically, what we're looking at is doing, figuring out, what is the roadmap and what is the priority.
So, and just one more thing, I apologize. As we do that roadmap, I think every other meeting we bring up the fact that there's grant opportunities, and there's especially for the CLG or the SHF, there's a known calendar. Once we start identifying what neighborhoods need what kind of work, maybe what we need to do is be thinking ahead of time about that calendar, and then how the Historic Preservation Commission can help staff, because there's just one of you.
And I do
and
a lot of other
recognize
things.
that. Yes. So what it would need for us to start tapping into some of these grant programs so that the onus isn't completely on the city of Longmont to pay for these surveys.
Thank you, Commissioner Norton. And Recording Secretary Yost, if you could underline and bold that comment so that we can just, put it on flashers. We can find funding for some of this, especially these smaller chunks. 100%.
Mayor Pett can attest to the fact that I do a lot of other things.
We don't doubt it.
Okay, great. Well, I appreciate that. So hopefully we'll have another more detailed presentation on this at the next meeting with graphics and so on, and that'll be very exciting. Okay, Commissioner Barnett.
Yeah, direct point out to the commission and to staff on page 29 of the report. It's page 80 of the packet. Talks about this. I think this is a very important paragraph, which is the whole idea of the original town site, and that the areas within the boundaries were not reviewed by this study, and that I think this whole paragraph leaves open a lot of things that really we need to either decide what we'd like to see or get some recommendations as to how these can be analyzed and presented to us. I mean, I think there's a real ball of wax right in that one paragraph. I would love to know the answers, but they're not going to be in the study. So the question is, when would we see those answers? Because those affect, otherwise this is, just paper without any recommendations, because they don't have the ability to do certain analysis.
Are you referring to the analysis of the planning and zoning regulations and so on?
Well, it just says original town site, and it points out all the things that this study, that this paper, this survey is not going to have in it. And then it would say that it says this would help determine the applicability of the standards process when considering future design and preservation guidelines for neighborhoods, other neighborhoods. Well, that's exactly what we're supposed to be doing.
Yeah. Well, in a big picture, I guess I would submit that this document is about how we obtain more information about the properties within our city that haven't been surveyed to date. And that is the foundation that we need to have, speaking of foundations tonight, in order to then move to a step where we hopefully are able to engage a preservation plan as a bigger picture. And at that time, that preservation plan becomes a place where all of that information happens. It's where the public gets engaged to participate, and we start putting together a bigger visionary document about preservation in Longmont. That's where I think that would land.
I would agree with that. And that preservation plan, as I see it at least, would tie into Envision Longmont and general comprehensive planning updates.
Absolutely.
To ensure that we're all working together.
Yep. Wonderful. Thank you. Okay, moving on. Prior business, I do not believe we have any. Is that true? Or do we have?
Welcoming Commissioner Tarek.
Yeah, that was prayer. Yes. Yeah. Why didn't somebody hit me over the head in chairman report for the chair? Because I totally intended to do that, and then I got lost in all the other stuff. So yes.
Thank you.
Welcome, Commissioner Tarek. Thank you for joining our fun little group, and we look forward to your contributions. All right. Any other further comments from the HPC commissioners? Anybody else have a comment they'd like to make tonight? No? Comment from our city council rep? No? All right. That will bring us to adjournment. Do I have a motion?
Well, I'm first, right? I make a motion to adjourn.
I second.
Thank you. Motion to adjourn by Commissioner Jacoby, seconded by Commissioner Norton. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. All right. Thank you. We are adjourned. Thank you all for your time this evening.